Once again, the Queen of Consorts surprises us, but not in a good way.
Made lurid and false claims about the royal family, which played on her fears and fueled paranoia.
The royal gala was already underway, when one quiet confirmation changed everything. Prince William had been prepared to smile, greet guests, and carry out another carefully controlled night of royal duty. Then an aide approached him with information about Princess Diana that he could not ignore. Within minutes, William stopped the event. Conversations died, palace staff froze, and the reason was devastatingly simple. Diana's portrait had been deliberately removed, and Queen Camilla's name was attached to the decision. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William did not react with fury. He went still. Around him, the gala carried on for a few more seconds, filled with senior royals, courtiers, donors, and dignitaries, expecting ceremony and carefully managed warmth. A royal gala is a palace gathering, used to represent continuity, duty, and unity, which made what happened next extraordinary. The prince leaned toward the senior household aide and asked him to repeat the confirmation. The answer did not change. Camilla had personally authorized Diana's portrait to be removed from a family corridor before the evening began. Catherine saw the change in her husband's face before anyone else understood what had happened. She moved closer and asked what was wrong. William answered with 5 words. It was removed deliberately. The princess needed no longer explanation. Diana's memory was not abstract royal history to him. It was tied to childhood, grief, and the mother who never lived to see him become the future king. Catherine stayed beside him as he looked toward the doorway where guests were arriving, and the silence between them became heavier than the music. The aide then disclosed the detail that hardened William's decision. The portrait had not been sent away for conservation, the routine care and preservation of artwork. It had been moved away from the ceremonial family rooms entirely, under instructions placing it outside the normal route for major royal occasions. William asked who had approved that placement. The aide confirmed the order through a documented account and repeated that the Queen Consort's instruction had been direct. William crossed to the gala coordinator and spoke quietly. End the program. The music stopped. Planned speeches were abandoned. Guests exchanged confused looks as staff moved through the room. Catherine remained close, while the prince refused to explain anything publicly. He had stopped the celebration, but he had not yet confronted Camilla. And once he did, the dispute would no longer be about one portrait. It would become a battle over who had the right to decide which memories the monarchy carried forward, and which ones were pushed aside. For William, this was never about decoration. Diana's portrait represented a mother whose presence had survived every palace renovation, every change of reign, and every uncomfortable chapter that followed her death. Camilla understood that history too. Catherine understood what it meant to William, and Charles knew perhaps better than anyone why removing that particular image could never be treated as an ordinary household decision. Suddenly, the gala dispute had reached directly into the family's oldest wound. William stood alone outside the reception rooms after the gala was cancelled, unable to shake the feeling that something deeply personal had been taken from him without warning. The portrait had occupied a familiar family corridor used during private receptions and major ceremonial movements, giving it meaning far beyond decoration. Over the years, he had passed that image before significant royal gatherings, carrying with him the quiet knowledge that his mother had never lived to see him become Prince of Wales. That title belongs to the senior heir who stands closest to the throne, and for him, it carried both duty and grief. Catherine approached carefully, sensing that his anger was turning into something heavier. Catherine asked what was hurting him most. William answered without hesitation. It was not simply that the portrait had been moved. It was that nobody had believed he deserved to know. He told her that Diana's picture had become one of the few silent links between the man he had become and the mother who had known him only as a boy. Catherine stayed beside him, and the future king admitted that secrecy had made the decision feel deliberate in a way the removal alone never could. Charles received news of the shutdown soon afterward and remained silent for several long moments. The king finally asked whether his son had confronted Camilla directly. That hesitation revealed how quickly he understood the danger. He knew this was not a disagreement over palace decoration. It was a collision between his wife, his son, and a history none of them had ever fully escaped. Camilla had already questioned why Diana remained so prominently displayed in an area increasingly connected to events involving the current sovereign and queen consort. The aide then gave William the detail that changed everything again. In a documented account of the artwork relocation, another staff member had objected before Diana's portrait was moved, warning that the decision could deeply upset him. The objection was dismissed with one chilling explanation. The instruction had come from above household level. Catherine immediately looked at her husband and asked, "When was this actually decided?" William's anger shifted direction. The portrait had disappeared before the gala ever began, and as he traced the order backward, one private palace conversation from weeks earlier emerged as the moment this entire crisis truly started. Weeks before the gala collapsed, the warning had already been given. During preparations for a private palace reception, Camilla stopped in front of Diana's portrait and asked one deceptively simple question: why was it still there? An aide initially treated the remark as casual. It was not. What followed became the specific trigger for everything William would later discover. A closed-door conversation about royal continuity, family symbolism, and whether the past should still occupy such a visible place in the present. Camilla had been moving through that corridor more often during official functions with Charles, and Diana's portrait had become impossible for her to ignore. 3 weeks before the gala, household staff were reviewing paintings, furniture, and ceremonial arrangements along the reception route. A ceremonial route simply means the rooms and corridors senior royals regularly pass through during formal palace events. The queen consort stopped beside the portrait, turned toward the senior aide, and asked why the former Princess of Wales still occupied such a prominent place. The question sounded simple. The tension behind it was not. The aide answered carefully. He explained that William had deep emotional ties to the portrait, and that moving it without warning could create a serious family rupture. Camilla listened, then became firmer. She argued that the current household could not continually arrange itself around unresolved history. Later, in a private conversation recorded in the aide's documented account, she gave the instruction that changed everything. Diana's portrait was to be moved before the upcoming gala. The aide hesitated again, but the decision stood. Charles heard about the proposed relocation soon afterward. The king did not order it, but he also did not immediately stop it. That silence would later carry enormous weight. William would see it not as neutrality, but as permission. For a son already disturbed by the secrecy surrounding his mother's image, his father's failure to intervene would become almost as painful as Camilla's original instruction. A palace staff member then entered the relocation into an internal artwork movement log, a record used to track where important paintings and objects are transferred inside royal residences. That small administrative entry would later prevent the decision from being dismissed as confusion or misunderstanding. Diana's portrait had been deliberately moved, and there was a clear trail showing when it happened and who had initiated it. Catherine learned the final detail from the same documented timeline. The portrait had not been shifted to another nearby corridor. It had been transferred to a less accessible storage area, away from the principal family rooms. William heard that and stopped asking for explanations through staff. He wanted Camilla in the same room. The gala had been cancelled because of what William discovered, but the deeper rupture began when he walked toward her, knowing exactly who had ordered Diana removed. There were no cheering crowds now, no orchestra, No carefully scripted royal smiles. William entered a private sitting room where Camilla was waiting, closed the door behind him, and asked only one question. "Did you order my mother's portrait removed?" Camilla did not deny it. That answer changed the confrontation instantly. What had begun as a dispute over palace presentation became a son demanding to know why his mother's memory had been quietly pushed aside without his knowledge. William had refused an aide's suggestion to delay the confrontation until the tension cooled. He wanted the truth while the evidence was still fresh, and the gala was still silent around them. Camilla entered knowing the event had been cancelled, but she initially treated the dispute as a challenge to a household decision. A household decision is an internal choice about how royal rooms, events, and family spaces are managed. To her, the portrait had been part of that machinery. To William, it was his mother. Camilla answered yes when he asked whether the instruction had come from her. William gripped the back of a chair and stared at her without raising his voice. "You had no right to do this without speaking to me." She pushed back immediately. The Queen Consort insisted she had never ordered Diana erased from history. She said she had wanted the current reign to have its own identity, instead of constantly living beside the emotional weight of the previous generation. William did not accept the distinction. He told her that moving the portrait secretly made the act feel exactly like erasure. Diana was not simply part of royal history to him. She was the mother who had shaped his childhood, the woman whose death had followed him into adulthood, and the person who never lived to see what he had become. Camilla listened, but she remained firm. She argued that he could not overturn every palace decision simply because it touched a painful memory. Then Camilla said something William had not expected. She believed Charles already knew the portrait would be moved. The words changed the entire confrontation. William stopped pressing her and asked exactly what the king had been told. She repeated that the discussion had reached him before the relocation happened and that she had never believed she was acting entirely without his awareness. William made one final decision before leaving. Diana's portrait would return before any future gala took place. Camilla warned him that royal authority could not become a battlefield for private grief. He answered that private grief was exactly why secrecy had been unacceptable. William opened the door and walked away without another word. He did not return to the abandoned gala rooms. He went directly toward Charles. Camilla had admitted giving the order, but William's anger was now heading toward something even more painful: his father's silence. Charles had spent decades living with the consequences of a family history the world refused to forget. Now that history stood in front of him again, not through newspapers or documentaries, but through his own son. William wanted a simple answer. Had the king known Diana's portrait was being moved? Charles could no longer remain outside the dispute. Whatever he said next would decide whether William saw this as Camilla's mistake, or a decision the crown itself had tolerated. William entered without ceremony and placed the question before his father. Charles, as sovereign and head of the royal household, carried final symbolic responsibility even when smaller palace arrangements were handled by staff. That mattered because this was no longer about who physically moved a painting. It was about who had allowed the decision to stand. The prince was not approaching him only as heir to the throne. He was approaching him as Diana's son. Charles listened while William repeated what the aide had confirmed. The king removed his glasses, set them down, and stayed silent for several seconds. Then he admitted that he had known discussions about relocating the portrait were taking place. He insisted he had not understood that the move would be completed before the gala, or that Diana's image would be placed away from the principal family rooms. William did not soften. He told his father that failing to stop the decision had still been a choice. Charles reacted with visible pain. He insisted that he had never ordered Diana to be hidden and would never deliberately wound either of his sons that way. Yet the monarch also refused to turn Camilla into a public target. He told William that reversing the decision was one thing, humiliating his wife before the household was another. That answer exposed the impossible position he now occupied. His son wanted accountability, his wife needed protection, and Diana's memory stood between them both. William then presented the internal timeline supplied through the Aide's documented account. It showed that staff had asked for clarification after Camilla's instruction because of the sensitivity surrounding the portrait. No order came back, reversing the move. Charles read the sequence carefully. This time, he did not defend the silence. The decision came quickly. Diana's portrait would return to its original corridor immediately. Charles also ordered that future changes involving prominent family memorials required direct consultation with the senior relatives most personally connected to them. The new restriction was narrow, but its meaning was unmistakable. William had won the immediate battle, yet he did not look relieved. Trust had already been damaged. Charles had restored Diana's portrait, but behind closed palace doors, Camilla was about to discover that something else had changed with it: the limits of her authority. The order came without ceremony. Diana's portrait was to be returned. The gala would not resume. And any future decision touching deeply personal royal memorials would require wider family consultation. For Camilla, the meaning was unmistakable. William had challenged her, Charles had reversed her, and staff who once followed her instruction without hesitation now understood that certain boundaries had been redrawn. The most painful consequence was not public humiliation. It was the sudden realization that the palace itself no longer felt unquestioningly hers. Camilla sat alone after Charles left the room and asked an aide whether the portrait had already been returned. The aide answered that preparations were underway. A family memorial, in palace terms, is an object or display carrying deep personal meaning for members of the royal family, not merely decorative value. That distinction now mattered more than ever. The queen consort nodded once, dismissed the aide, and said nothing else. For the first time that night, she seemed to understand that the decision had moved far beyond a disagreement over presentation. Charles had already made his position clear. He told Camilla privately that the mistake was not wanting the current household to have its own identity. The mistake was touching Diana's image without recognizing how William and Harry would experience it. The king knew that both sons had spent much of their lives watching their mother's memory become public property, and any secret attempt to alter her place inside the palace risked feeling deeply personal. Camilla believed William had interpreted her motives in the darkest possible way. William believed she still did not understand the point. William refused to issue an immediate public explanation. He wanted the conflict contained long enough to prevent the cancelled gala from becoming a spectacle before the family had even faced what had happened. Guests were quietly told that the evening had ended because of an internal family matter. The prince did not mention Camilla publicly. That restraint protected her from immediate humiliation, even while the reversal of her decision made the shift in authority impossible to miss. Then another detail surfaced. The original staff objection had been preserved in the artwork file, confirming through a documented palace note that concern about William's reaction had been raised before the portrait was moved. Camilla could no longer argue that nobody had anticipated the emotional damage. William made one unexpected request before the portrait returned. He asked Catherine to accompany him. He did not want witnesses, applause, or another confrontation. He wanted someone beside him who understood why the moment hurt. Before that could happen, Charles sent for his son. No aides, no Camilla, no palace machinery. The institution had already delivered its decision. Now only a father and son remained. Facing a wound neither could delegate away. For once, there were no secretaries taking notes, and no courtiers waiting beyond the conversation. Charles and William sat alone. The portrait dispute had already been settled, yet neither man pretended that a frame on a wall was the real issue. William was still Diana's son. Charles was still the man who had carried his own complicated history with her into a new reign. And in the silence between them, father and son finally confronted what the palace decision had reopened. Charles had arranged the meeting before Diana's portrait was rehung, because he did not want another layer of palace procedure between them. A private royal meeting simply meant there would be no aides shaping the language, no written briefing guiding the exchange, and no official buffer protecting either man from what had to be said. William arrived calmer than he had been with Camilla, but he made one thing clear. He was not trying to control every image of his mother. He was trying to protect the dignity attached to her memory. Charles finally admitted what his son had been waiting to hear. He should have intervened the moment he learned that moving the portrait was being discussed. William said nothing at first. The king then went further, telling him that Diana's place in the lives of her sons should never have been treated as a household inconvenience. That sentence changed the mood. For the first time since the gala stopped, William was not fighting for recognition. His father was giving it to him. William answered with the pain he had held back all night. The secrecy, he said, had hurt more than the relocation itself. It made him fear that the family had become comfortable rewriting difficult history instead of living honestly beside it. Charles understood the accusation. He also insisted that restoring Diana's portrait was not meant as an attack on Camilla. The queen consort had her place in the present, but a new reign did not require removing the people who had shaped the family before it. Charles then disclosed one final decision through a documented household instruction. He had personally ordered that the original display history of Diana's portrait be preserved in palace records, including where it had stood and why it mattered. The change meant no future administrative decision could quietly strip away its significance without scrutiny. William finally agreed that the gala could be rescheduled. But not yet. Diana's portrait had to return first. Father and son had reached an understanding behind closed doors. Outside them, however, the cancelled gala was becoming impossible for Britain to ignore, and the public was about to learn why the music had stopped. By morning, the empty ballroom mattered less than the reason behind it. Britain woke to a royal dispute that seemed instantly familiar, because Diana's memory had never truly left the national conversation. William's decision divided opinion, but one detail dominated every discussion. His mother's portrait had been removed without his knowledge. What happened inside the palace was suddenly being judged outside it, and one vivid public image transformed a private family confrontation into something far larger than the cancelled gala itself. William watched the morning coverage beside Catherine and grew visibly uncomfortable as broadcasters described the shutdown as a direct attack on Camilla. The prince insisted that framing missed the point. He had not stopped the evening to punish the queen consort. He had stopped it because Diana's portrait had been removed through a decision he believed ignored the emotional weight carried by her sons. Palace communications soon confirmed that the gala had ended early after a private family disagreement, and that the portrait would return to its previous position. That confirmation mattered because it turned what might have remained private tension into a public argument over memory, authority, and respect. Catherine listened as commentators divided the issue into two competing ideas. Some argued that the current royal household had the right to shape its own identity. Others believed preserving Diana's place inside royal history was part of protecting the monarchy's credibility. William heard both sides, but he kept returning to the same distinction. Change was one thing, secrecy was another. Catherine understood why that difference mattered to him, and she reminded him that anger could easily be mistaken for revenge once the public entered the story. Camilla faced the other side of that judgment. She watched coverage suggesting that she had tried to erase Diana, and told Charles that the public would never separate this decision from their complicated history. The king did not dismiss her concern. He knew the symbolism was now bigger than the original instruction, And he also knew that William's reaction had become part of the national conversation. Outside Kensington Palace, the public response became impossible to ignore. A small crowd began leaving white flowers near the gates. By afternoon, one handwritten card carried a simple message: "A mother is not erased." Television coverage repeated the image, while a national broadcaster reconstructed the sequence through a documented timeline. Camilla's instruction, the aide's warning, the confirmation given to William, and the prince's decision to stop the gala. Palace staff quietly completed the restoration, while attention remained outside. Diana's portrait was back. Now William faced the final choice: turn that return into a victory over Camilla, or refuse triumph altogether and show what the confrontation had truly been about. The portrait returned to the wall without cameras, applause, or ceremony. William stood before it only briefly. Catherine remained beside him. Charles arrived moments later, while Camilla chose not to enter until the family had finished. There was no victory speech, because William had never wanted one. What began with a shocking gala shutdown ended with something more consequential. A boundary had been drawn around memory itself. Diana could belong to history without being pushed out of the family's present. William approached the restored portrait with Catherine and stopped in silence. The image had returned to the exact corridor from which it had been removed, ending the practical dispute that had forced the gala to collapse. A family memorial is more than decoration inside a royal residence. It carries personal history for those directly connected to the person being remembered. That was why the future king had fought so hard. He looked at his mother's portrait, said nothing, touched nothing, and finally turned away. Catherine understood the meaning of that restraint. He did not need applause to prove that Diana mattered. Charles had already formalized the lesson behind the confrontation. The king confirmed, through a documented household instruction, that major decisions involving deeply personal family memorials could no longer be made without consulting the relatives most directly affected. The change was not designed to punish Camilla. It was designed to prevent another private decision from reopening an old family wound. William privately made the same point. He did not want the queen consort humiliated, removed, or publicly attacked. He wanted acknowledgement that becoming queen did not give anyone the power to simplify painful history. Camilla accepted the reversal. She did not challenge the portrait's return, and she did not attempt to reclaim the decision that Charles had overturned. The queen understood that the confrontation had drawn a clearer emotional boundary around Diana's legacy. Her place beside the king remained intact, but so did the memory of the woman whose sons still carried her absence into every major chapter of their lives. Charles finally addressed both sides of the conflict. He acknowledged that the monarchy could not protect itself by removing uncomfortable memories. Its strength depended on carrying history openly, even when that history hurt. William accepted that answer because it was never revenge he had wanted. It was recognition. The gala shutdown would not be remembered as a declaration of war against Camilla. It became the moment William refused to let institutional convenience outweigh personal memory. Diana's portrait returned. Charles finally intervened. Camilla accepted the limits of the decision. And William proved that protecting his mother's place did not require destroying anyone else's. The music stopped for one night, but the lasting message was far quieter. A monarchy can move forward without pretending its past never happened. And William's final act was not revenge, but remembrance. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.